Spider-Man 2 has been out for a little while now. I'm sure most of you have played it, and why wouldn't you? It has better swinging, a bigger map, and a brand new story. It looked like this would be one of the best Spider-Man games of all time, and while it comes so close to doing that, it has more than a few issues I wanted to point out. Before we get started, I want to say I don't think this is a bad game, but there are some issues I found with the game that I wanted to talk about. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. By this point, I'm sure everyone is aware that the symbiote plays a big role in the story in this game. Harry needs it to treat his disease, but after Peter gets nearly killed, Harry gives it to Peter. There's nothing wrong with how Peter gets the symbiote or anything like that. I think it works well. What I want to talk about is how the symbiote affects Peter, or rather how quickly it affects him. Right after he gets it, and I really do mean right after he gets it, he's already acting aggressively.
Just what Craven has been searching for.
And I feel sorry for him.
It just kinda comes out of nowhere. It doesn't stop here either. A little while later, he's belittling Miles behind his back and talking about how he doesn't need anyone.
Miles was off his game. We almost had Lizard.
I'm sure he was just trying to help.
Sometimes it's just easier to do things myself.
Keep in mind, he hasn't had the symbiotes for very long. It's only been about a day or two, so this sudden shift in attitude comes off as rather bizarre. In other stories where Pete has the symbiote suit, his pre-existing emotions are enhanced by it. Let's use Spider-Man 3 as an example. I know that movie's not perfect, but it has the symbiote and blah blah whatever, shut up, just let me use it. In that movie, Spider-Man was loved by everyone, talking about him on TV, writing newspapers about him. Heck, they even throw him a parade. He was surrounded by approval and love. It fueled his ego. It even started making its way into his personal life. While MJ was struggling, all Peter could do was talk about himself and how well he was doing. This created problems, so later when he got the symbiote suit, it just enhanced them. Enhanced his confidence, his ego. He became quite a narcissist with the black suit. Whenever he had conflicts in his life, he would just go back to the black suit, which ended up creating a dependence for it. So while Spider-Man 3's symbiote amplifies destructive emotions, Spider-Man 2's seems to create them. Peter in Spider-Man 2 doesn't have the same problems as Peter in Spider-Man 3. He doesn't have conflicts in his personal life. He didn't have an ego problem. He was always just a humble, down-to-earth person who kept going no matter what. So when he started becoming angry and frustrated with people, it didn't feel right. It felt as if he was acting that way because we expected him to, not because it happened naturally. Let's take a look at his life in this game and see if we can piece together something that may fit just a little bit better. During the game, we see him struggling in many areas. He can hardly afford the financial responsibility of his home, which requires MJ to work a job she isn't fond of. We see him become a teacher, which seems like something he's really passionate about, but he isn't allowed to fully thrive since he's chained down by Spider-Man. Not only that, the weight is increased due to the fact that Miles still seeks guidance from him, which means he's abandoning his life to help Miles as Spider-Man. Even when he is Spider-Man, Miles continues to show that he's better than Pete in some areas. He rescues Pete during the Sandman boss fight, and his bioelectricity powers were an extreme benefit in that battle. So, we have a Peter Parker who's struggling financially because he's Spider-Man, and when he is Spider-Man, he's almost inferior to Miles. This is such a good base that could have made the symbiote work so much better. This is going to sound a little crazy, but make Peter jealous of Miles. Make him have resentment. Make him feel like Miles is constantly showing off. This way, when he talks about not needing anyone else, it fits better. It gives us a better reason to understand why he thinks he doesn't need anyone. Before, he felt insecure and worse than Miles, but with the symbiote he's stronger, faster, better. And since he feels like he's better than Miles, have him build an ego. Make him a bit of a narcissist. It would make his personality shift seem a lot more appropriate. I also think the Scream boss fight helps add some extra conflict that could have been in the game. After MJ is taken over by a symbiote, she starts verbally bashing Peter, talking about how she works a job she hates because of him, how she just lives in his shadow, how he only cares about being Spider-Man. This could have worked so well in the game, but this conflict is only relevant for this boss fight. Maybe make it a slow build throughout the game. Have MJ talk about how she hates her job more, about how supporting Pete is draining. That way, all the dialogue in this scene would be a lot more impactful. I don't doubt MJ had these feelings before, so I'm not saying they're completely invalid, but show the player in some way that Pete and MJ are having problems. The game has a really good place to start, but the elements just aren't used like they could have been. I do think the story is really good, but there are some elements that could use a little tweaking to make it better. Spider-Man 2 is an action game, so of course combat is going to be one of the main focuses. While there are multiple parts that are fleshed out and well done, other things seem to be ignored, specifically the exclusion of web gadgets and suit powers. Spider-Man and Miles Morales had plenty of fun gadgets and suit powers to spice up combat. However, in Spider-Man 2, most gadgets are missing and suit powers are non-existent. This was fairly disappointing since I liked messing around with the web trip mines or holograms in the first 2 games. Even in the Miles Morales game, we still had suit abilities on top of Venom powers, so it's not like the devs worried we'd be super overpowered. They let us have both previously. And in my opinion, the gadgets we have now just aren't as fun or interesting as the gadgets we had before. Moving on to the suits, since the suits had powers, I wanted to collect parts to unlock more suits, but in Spider-Man 2, the drive to unlock new suits has diminished in some way. They are completely cosmetic, they add pretty much nothing to the overall gameplay. And this is such a shame because suit powers like Web Blossom or Arms Race made combat so much more fun. You could use these powers to be more creative. Same thing with the missing web gadgets. It's just strange to see Insomniac add features to combat, then remove other features like I mentioned. It's a one step forward, one step back kind of thing. The way you progress through gadgets and abilities is strange too. In the first game, leveling up gave you more health, swing speed, damage, things like that. But now, you have to juggle all that by yourself. Not only are you leveling up each Spider-Man's individual skill tree, they also have a combined skill tree. In addition, there's also a skill tree for suit tech. I can appreciate the amount of freedom here, but it also seems like too much at the same time. I would have been completely okay if they kept the way level ups worked in the first 2 games. I never felt restricted or held back. It felt like I was just making my way through the game and being naturally rewarded with buffs. I think the way Spider-Man 2 handles it is fine, but I can see a newcomer being a little overwhelmed with all the skills and abilities they have to keep track of. Venom is a classic Spider-Man villain that I'm sure we all love. I really enjoy Venom as a character and as a villain, but he isn't exactly what you'd expect him to be in this new game. I know some other people aren't a huge fan of Harry becoming Venom, but I honestly don't see anything wrong with it. I think it's a nice change of pace. However, in this game, Harry becoming Venom doesn't feel quite right. After Harry bonds with the symbiote again, they're both set on trying to heal the world, and to them, healing the world is turning everyone into symbiote creatures. The city gets completely overrun with giant tendrils and symbiotes everywhere. The idea itself isn't too crazy. We saw something like this in Web of Shadows. This is unrelated, but something that I thought was sort of strange is the fact they call themselves Venom. Venom is usually associated with poison, but to them, they're healing the world, so the fact they call themselves that kinda doesn't really work. Anyways, it just felt a little rushed, like we had no time to see Harry become obsessed with this goal. Once he got the symbiote back, he just kinda became a villain, and it didn't feel natural. I could be completely wrong about this, but I have an idea. I think the symbiote was supposed to be corrupt with Pete's negative emotions, so once Harry got the symbiote back, they sort of transferred to him. That's what made him go down this more destructive path. So I think it would have been cool to play into this a little bit. Have Harry talk to himself, sort of like what Norman did in the first Spider-Man movie. Show us that he's being corrupted by the symbiote. To me, Harry becoming a villain feels a little bit forced. I think if they just spent a little more time and explained this change, it could have worked a lot better. Before I wrap up this video, I want to go over some smaller complaints I had with this game. Fully completing this game gets kinda boring and even unrewarding at times. Most of the side missions are pretty enjoyable. Find Grandpa and all of the flame missions were cool to me. But when it comes to other things like all of the spider bots and prowler stashes, that's where I have a bit of a problem. Doing the same thing over and over again really started to become more of a chore. I thought the backpacks in the first game were infinitely better than the spider bots. At least with the backpacks, you get references to other Spider-Man media and information about this version of Spider-Man. Same thing with the time capsules and scavenger hunt in Miles Morales. But with the spider bots, you just kinda collect them and move on. It didn't feel as fun or rewarding as it could have. Plus, the cutscene you get after collecting all of them just wasn't that cool. Your reward for all that hard work was just a cameo of a cut character from across the Spider-Verse. Lucky me. There's also a lot of basic features missing in this game. The fact we didn't have replayable missions or New Game Plus at launch is just wild. Those are features we should have had when the game released. I know they are adding in those features later, but they should have been here from the start. Next, I thought the stealth sections were almost meaningless. As you progress through the game, you get these web lines that can be used to take down enemies. This makes stealth so easy when it used to be pretty fun in the other games. In the first game, you had to use the environment and your gadgets to take down enemies efficiently. However, with the web line, you can just take down enemies super quickly. I know stealth was never super important in the other games, but it's just a little disappointing to see it watered down here. Lastly, this game seems to be far more glitchy than the first two games. Luckily, they've never been completely game-breaking or anything, but I saw more than a few. Multiple times I was somehow swinging inside of buildings or falling out of the boundaries. Even during the swinging, the physics would start to go a little crazy sometimes. I'm not trying to imply that this game is a completely broken and glitchy mess. I just saw more glitches than the first two games. I know I criticized this game a lot, more than I've done with other games, but I don't want to say this game is bad or not worth playing. Far from that. It's a great Spider-Man game that I've sunk a lot of time into because I enjoy it. However, this game isn't everything it could have been. It added some interesting and cool new mechanics while taking away other features we were used to. It took one step forward and one step back. A lot of people love this game, and I really do see why. It does so much right and expands on the games before it. Hopefully Spider-Man 3 will improve on some of the slip-ups Spider-Man 2 has, because I still do think Insomniac makes great games. Even if Spider-Man 2 has some flaws, I still am excited to see where it all goes next. Alrighty, end of the video. You know what that means. I get to ramble for as long as I want. This video was definitely a big change of pace. I'm not quite used to heavily critiquing video games like this, because for me, I personally just prefer to talk about games that I enjoyed. Like, if you look at any of my videos, you'll pretty much always see, I really liked this game. I really liked this game. This game was really good. So really digging in deep and finding the issues with it, it was a lot harder because I try to just keep it positive. So yeah, it was just kind of weird heavily critiquing a game. And I don't want to say this game is bad. It's definitely not. For me personally, it's just my least favorite Spider-Man because, like I mentioned before, it's not everything it could have been. During all the build-up, during all the trailers and everything, this looked like it would be one of the best video games, the best Spider-Man game of all time. But then, you know, everything I mentioned, the story wasn't as great as it could have been, the gameplay and combat wasn't as great as it could have been. It was a little disappointing, honestly. My biggest worry for this video, this is something I am still worried about, is that people will think I'm just looking for reasons to hate it, just making excuses. I don't want it to come off that way. I really did try to make fair and valid points, and when I did make points, I tried my best to give context, I did my best to give evidence. Like, with the whole Peter symbiote thing, I tried to use another Spider-Man story that had the symbiote to kind of help give some context, some evidence for my point, things like that. So I really don't want this is what I'm worried about. I really don't want this to seem like I'm just for no reason hating on this game. There's some problems I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to do my best to prove what I was saying wasn't baseless claims. That's what I'm trying to say. I wanted to prove I wasn't just making baseless critiques, like just complaining for no reason. To kind of add on to that, some of the things I heard some other creators say, I kind of agreed with. There was one video, I can't remember what it is, I'll put a link, like a little iCard or something. There's a video called Spider-Man 2 Isn't a Masterpiece. That's where I got some of the other evidence to help me explain some of the whole thing I was talking about with the Peter symbiote. That was an idea I had after I finished the game. I was like, he doesn't really seem like he's acting rude because he was naturally. It felt just forced. And I watched that video, and then they had brought up the whole Spider-Man 3, he was loved by everyone, his ego was out of control. I was like, oh, that can actually help me kind of add some evidence to help me explain why I think the way I do. Similar thing with some ordinary gamers. When they had made their Spider-Man 2 video, they also pointed out the no gadgets, no suit powers was pretty weird. And I was thinking, oh, that's cool that some other creators had brought up some points that I was also thinking when I played the game. So that was cool to see as well. I've been rambling on, I'll try to wrap it up soon, but the point I'm trying to make is I'm glad other creators had similar thoughts as me as well. By the way, I'm not trying to say that I am the one who came up with these thoughts. Most of these people made these points way before I did, but I was glad to see other people thought similar things as me as well. So it made me feel like I wasn't the only one. Like other people also had these ideas and these same critiques. So overall, Spider-Man 2, it's a really fun game. It's a great game, an amazing Spider-Man game, but it just wasn't as good or as polished as it could have been. But if you like it, I really do think it's great. It's a great game, and I think you should keep liking it if you like it. But with all of that out of the way, hopefully you enjoyed the video. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you all later.